Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
And we start with the backward-looking economic numbers out of the United States this week and the forward-looking statement of economic projections from the Fed and what the chair, Jay Powell, had to say about it. And we welcome back our very special contributor. He's Larry Summers of Harvard. So, Larry, great to have you with us. What did you make out of, we had some encouraging numbers, actually, on inflation. At the same time, the Fed is a little reluctant to talk too quickly about cutting.
The numbers were encouraging. It's 1 month, but, every month is data, and I think the right posture has to be agnosticism about where we are going forward. It's hard to interpret the Fed's forecasts because they probably had a lot of inertia with everybody having set their view coming into the meeting. So it's not really clear that the projections that people were making genuinely reflected the new numbers. That was a point that Chairman Powell stressed.
We also have fiscal policy issues coming up that, in a sense, are on the ballot come November. There's increasing discussion about the alternatives between Joe Biden and Donald Trump with respect to fiscal policy. And you've been outspoken on the question, as others have been, about the possibility of inflation with the Trump economic policy. Take us through that.
Look, I don't think there's been a more inflationary presidential economic policy platform in my lifetime. Perhaps George McGovern in 1972 in some ways would be a comparison, but other than that, I don't think there's been remotely comparably irresponsible set of proposals. His tariff proposals are the biggest supply shock, pushing up prices, not just of imported goods, but of all the goods that compete with imported goods. That anybody who's worried about gouging should think that more competition, including from abroad, is a very, very important step. And he's for much greater restrictions on the supply of labor, leading to more wage inflation pressures. And he's for scaling back the subsidies to renewable energy, raising energy costs. So look at it from demand, look at it from supply. This is a prescription for a major increase in inflation. And of course, the expectation of that major increase in inflation, and possibly the fact that the Fed will be under much more pressure to prove that it's credible, this could easily be a prescription for a 10% mortgage rate, something that I lived through when I bought my first house, but that I didn't think we were going to see again in the United States. This is really dangerous stuff.
Larry, let me pick up on the tariffs issue specifically. As we know, former President Trump traveled to Capitol Hill this week, and there were reports in the press that he floated, at least as an idea, replacing some or all of income tax with tariffs. There was one report that actually would just replace it entirely. What would that do from a macroeconomic point of view?
Look, people misspeak. Sometimes they're not serious about the things they say. That's probably a feature of candidate Trump. But replacing the income tax with revenue, with tariff, would be the worst macroeconomic policy proposal in U.S. history. It, of course, burdens the middle class and the poor who purchase goods that exist on international markets. So it's regressive, as many economic commentators have suggested. But that is actually the least of it. Think about it this way. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which did enormous damage, some people would say made the Depression great, were 0.6% of GDP. If you replaced half of income tax revenues, not all like he talked about, if you replaced half of income tax revenues with tariffs, those would be tariffs 6 times Smoot-Hawley levels. That's got the potential to do enormous damage to the competitiveness of every U.S. exporter, to do huge damage to all kinds of workers who use imported goods in what their businesses produce, to create a downward spiral as much higher prices for everything we import means consumers have less to spend on everything else, create worldwide economic warfare as the rest of the world responds. This is a prescription for the mother of all stagflations. Now, I don't think it's likely to happen, even if President Trump is elected. So I don't know that markets should be discounting all of that. But this is something that I think should be viewed very ominously.
Larry, let me turn to another subject that you and I have talked about in the past, but we had developments this week over in Bari, Italy, with the meeting of the G7 as they took action, actually, on the Russian frozen assets. As I understand it, it's not so much the principal, but the interest off of them that would back a bond. You, early on in this program, called for the use of those Russian assets, the central bank assets, the government assets, to be used for Ukraine. Are you pleased with what they've done? Have they gone far enough?
This is a major step forward. I am very pleased, but I don't think they've done everything that could be done. Look, the best estimate is that there's in the neighborhood of $300 billion of frozen Russian assets. Those assets have already been frozen. Nobody thinks they're going back to Russia. So if there are issues about expectations, about fairness, any of that, we crossed that Rubicon 2 years ago. The big step they took was not just authorizing the use of the interest, but setting up a loan mechanism so today the Ukrainians are going to get access not just to this year's interest payments, but to interest payments out over quite a number of years, perhaps totaling $50 billion or more. I think ultimately the right thing to do is going to be to simply take these assets or take the perpetuity of all the income that they will generate. But $50 billion is a lot of money. It comes at a very important time to provide a shot in the arm for Ukraine. It's going to be crucial for us, for the international financial institutions, to work with the Ukrainians to make sure that those resources are used with maximum effectiveness. And this also, David, does something else that's important. If this had not been done, I and others were very concerned that even if resources from Ukraine could be found in national budgets, it would come out of other vital international expenditures to combat global warming, to protect against pandemic threats, to reduce global poverty. And so this is also an important step for internationalism more broadly. It's been a long road on this, and while it didn't start with as aggressive an effort from the U.S. government as I might have hoped, I really want to congratulate Secretary Yellen, especially people at the National Security Council, her deputy, Wally Adeyemo, Sherpa Dileep Singh, for having driven something that is really profoundly important. This was U.S. leadership with others being reluctant, and it was a case study in the last few months of effective, determined, creative economic diplomacy.
Okay, Larry, thank you so very much for being with us. That's Larry Summers of Harvard, our very special contributor here on Wall Street Week.